Ready to go. Good morning and welcome to today's meeting. I'll just confirm that Councillor Fergus Bennett, you're online and you can see and hear us clearly?
Yes, I'm online. I can hear you. Thanks.
Thank you. I officially open today's meeting at 9:32 a.m. and I would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, water, lands and community. This meeting is being run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development DAP Regulations 2011. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website and in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development DAP Regulations 2011. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. We have a full panel for today's meeting. We have in our panel today, to my furthest left, Councillor Rebecca Coghlan. We have online Councillor Fergus Bennett. To my right, I have Deputy Presiding Member Dale Page. To my left, we have Specialist Member John Syme, and my name is Francesca Lafanti, Presiding Member. We have no apologies for this meeting, for this part of the meeting, and I will advise that we will deal with the councillor members for Part C, Part D when we get to it. We have no apologies and no members on leave of absence. Minutes for this DAP meeting will be available on the website. Members, can I have a show of hands, you are all visual, that you have duly considered all matters before you, including the RA that was published on the 14th of March and further Direction 13 response. That is unanimous for the minute taker. Members, are there any disclosures of interest? I'll first go to councillors. Well, this matter, I understand, was considered by a council meeting. Do either of the councillors have any interests? Yes, Councillor Fergus Bennett.
Yes, I just wanted to declare that as a councillor, this development has come before the council previously, but I will consider the matter with full impartiality and on its merits.
Thank you. Approval is granted to fully participate in today's meeting, including voting on the item. Over to yourself, Councillor Rebecca.
Presiding Member. I have also submitted an impartiality statement and signed into the JDAP Secretariat, and I will consider the item on its merits. I did participate in the special council meeting which looked at this agenda item, but I'm here as an independent JDAP member.
Thank you for that interest disclosure. Full participation is granted to participate, and that includes voting on the item. Members, are there any other disclosures in relation to this part of the agenda? There are no other disclosures. We will now move forward. There are no Form 1 applications in relation to this part of the agenda. We do, however, have a Form 2 application, and we will deal first with our presenters for this meeting before moving on to the item. Members, as you are aware, we've received a late request for presentation today. Mayor Fiona Argyle from the City of Nedlands. Approval has been granted for Mayor Fiona Argyle to present to us today, and I would invite you forward. If you can come forward to these chairs in front of us, and you will be able to be seen by presenters.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to address you all. I am aware you are judging an amendment this morning. However, I wanted to take this opportunity to say that this, again, is not an appropriate building in this location. The site is zoned L Local Centre and R60. The L for Local Centre is to ensure non-residential uses are located at street level. The R60 is a residential zoning, yet there is no residential at all in this building. The state and federal government talk a lot about the shortage of housing, and you are the representatives of the government, yet This is an opportunity for more local housing. Instead, what's been approved is a large medical complex in a quiet neighbourhood. A rear suburban laneway acts as the entrance to a huge car park. We have private homes at either side of this lane, and they are set to have hundreds of cars on a daily basis, travelling in and out. We do not need a medical centre. We happen to have the largest private hospital in Australia in our city. We do, however, need housing. We need a village. We need a sense of home and a place for our community. Our local planning policy 5.14 is also important here. Parts relate to the Waratah precinct and they stress vibrancy, which is to attract more people in evening hours, creating an opportunity for residents to mingle in a safe suburban setting. With a predominance of medical centre use, this will not occur. So I strongly urge the JDAP to respectfully request a complete redesign. This site is a perfect opportunity for smart redevelopment. We simply need to follow the R codes. Less medical centre, lower height, a new vehicle entrance, and most importantly, residential in compliance with the zoning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your presentation. Mayor, just before you move on, I'll just ask if any members have any questions for you. Are there any questions from members to our first presenter? Yes.
Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you, Mayor Argyle. You talked about the demand for a residential component. Is that because in this area people want to age in place and stay in the suburb or come to the suburb?
Look, the whole every city and across in Perth and across Western Australia and Australia, we are facing an ageing community, and these people do want to stay in their area. 25% of our electorate is over the age of 65, and they have nowhere to go. But also, this is a residential zoning, and this site has no residential. We support redevelopment. We support the redevelopment of this site, but it has no residential at all. R60 zoning and local centre.
Can I ask another question, please? Under sensible planning, this is actually a Waratah precinct with LPP 5.14. Can you expand a little bit more about what is a local centre in this location?
Well, actually, it says in the R codes, and to a degree, it does meet that. The local centre planning that commercials on the ground floor. The issue I have is the fact that it's a huge medical centre above that, and that's something we don't need. So it's not meeting the residential component. So it does meet the local centre on the ground floor because it's commercial. There's a cafe and a liquor barn or whatever's there, and it meets that requirement, but it has no residential, and that's why I'm here today.
Thank you.
Another question. Yes. So the clause 67 amenity, they've looked at the submissions, but has clause 67 been expanded enough in this application to where it sits in the community?
I think it needs a whole redesign. I think this is one of the things that slipped through. And I think, the JDAP has got a really good argument to really ask for a whole redesign, given the shortage of housing and designing something for a local area. We want people in place. We want a village community, and this is totally inappropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any further questions to our first presenter? Thank you for your presentation. We will now move to our second presenter, Callum Thatcher. If you would like to come forward, Callum. As you're aware, there's a 3-minute time frame. I should have said that earlier. I will hand over to yourself to present on this matter.
Presentation up, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning all. Thank you for the members for the opportunity to present this morning. So my name is Carl Thatcher from Element, and I also have with me Stephen Pennock, the project architect. We've prepared a presentation to summarise the major modifications to help articulate the content and purpose of the Form 2 in front of you. It's our view that these changes are of little significance and wholly consistent with the previous development approval. Thank you. The refusal recommendation and the reasons provided we find to be wholly consistent with the proposed modifications that have been submitted as part of the Form 2. We note items relating to building height and vehicle access remain unchanged. In summary, the project has substantially progressed with detailed construction documentation underway and preliminary leasing discussions occurring. This has resulted in some minor modifications to the building to respond to improving functionality for tenants and responding to operational needs, which in turn will improve the quality of the development. One of the most significant moves relates to the southeast tenancies. These tenancies were by far the most challenging to activate due to the limited visibility and connection issues created by the fall of the sites. In order to overcome this, the basement has been altered to include a new lift shaft, effectively creating a new front door and improve access and visibility to these corner tenancies. This will improve the stability of the businesses and furthermore expand the interests in operators, which will benefit the activation of Waratah Avenue. These changes are improves how deliveries and collections will also occur, providing a designated loading bay and also providing a proper back of house for these tenancies, removing this from Waratah Avenue. Minor adjustments to the ground floor land uses are also proposed. This includes the change from medical to shop fronting Robert Street and more defined internal tenancy layouts. This includes more detailed petitions, and this is purely based on preliminary leasing feedback. This also includes general staff amenities improvements. So we've expanded the mezzanine floor, which is largely all internal changes to provide improved servicing for potential occupants of the building. It also includes further bicycle storage in the basement as well. With respect to the conditions, we request the panel to consider amending condition 25, which relates to a Green Star rating. It's currently proposed to be a 5-star Green Star rating, and we propose for it to be reduced to a 4-star Green Star rating. Now, the primary reason for this amended condition is a 5-star rating does not allow gas supply to the building. This will have a major impact on restaurant operators, given the superiority of gas products for cooking. A 4-star rating will require a zero carbon action plan, which will establish a time period for the development to be eventually fossil fuel free. However, currently gas remains the preferred option for restaurant operators. As noted as well, the project is aiming to achieve a 5-star NABERS energy rating as well, which we're happy for the panel to also condition. This amendment is not seeking to reduce the sustainability obligations of the development, however, it's simply to respond to tenants' requirements. Finally, I just want to quickly address the conditions that have been suggested to be imposed. Obviously, the recommended conditions we do not support. Simply, these conditions have no relevance to the Form 2 modifications and are not reasonable conditions to be applied. We're not seeking to amend any of these aspects of the previous approval relating to height, vehicle access, bulk and scale, all remains unchanged. So therefore, these conditions are not valid. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions to this presenter? John Syme, and then
No, you go first.
Yeah, just on the energy ratings, are you happy you can achieve a 5-star NABERS rating?
Correct, that is correct, yes, yes.
Any further questions from yourself?
Mr. Thatcher, can you expand, please, on the rear where you were talking about the challenges of the site and why you were trying to have a new entry point? It seems like you're, after the fact, trying to shoehorn development into the site. Could you tell us more about that, please?
Through the chair. So those southeast tenancies, because of the fall of the site has basically 1 metre fall across the site currently. And the primary entry is also on Robert Street, and we do have an entry on Waratah Avenue, but we're also concerned about how those tenancies will be visualised and viewed, because if the activity is drawn away to the corner of the Waratah and Robert Street, we're concerned about how those tenancies will be activated. Businesses obviously like to have as much visibility to the street as possible, but they also want to be seen from internal tenancies so they can have access to those spaces. Currently, because of the nature of the development and because it's split level, we had a concern, and the developer had a concern with how tenants would go from Robert Street and then down the stairs and then into these corner tenancies, which is how it is currently. So what we've done is a separate lift shaft's been included into the basement. So for cars and primarily for cars as well, when they drive in, they have direct access, front door access to these tenancies. So that's the major move for those tenancies. The nature of the building is not changing. It's just the fact that we've included effectively a new lift shaft directly into these tenancies.
Thank you. Any other questions from members?
Yeah, just
Yes.
if I might just follow up on that precise point. Your general RL is 18.4, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Something like that. And at on the corner of depends on the corner, the restaurant cafe, one of them in on the corner of Robert Street, right on the corner, that goes up by nearly a metre, and that Waratah Avenue frontage goes up by nearly a metre.
Correct. Yeah, so it steps down, yeah, as a straight.
So you step down,
Correct.
back into Roberts Road.
That's right, yes.
Any further questions? There are no further questions at this juncture. We will move to officers from the city. If officers would like to come forward. We have Chantel Wereskier, is that correct? And Bruce Thompson. Apologies if the pronunciation was poor. Over to yourself, officers. Do you want to make any comments on what you've heard today or provide any further information to panel members?
I don't really want to make any further comment. Other than the Mayor has made 2 deputations to this panel on behalf of this project, and the community views are represented by the Mayor. I have experience in the consultation meetings about this project and also in some community meetings. So there is a very strong feeling that the residential component and the overbearing quantity of medical centre is a very strong community issue. In terms of the planning regulations, we stand by the RA report.
Thank you. Panel members, do you have any questions to the officers? Yes.
Just for a second, could you tell me more about vehicle access from the rear and the appropriateness of that lane to cope with vehicles?
Yeah, it's standard planning practice where vehicle access is provided from the lowest order road, in this case being the laneway. That is consistent with our local planning policy 5.14 as well, which says that no vehicle access is to be taken from Waratah Avenue or Robert Street. So in that case, it has to be taken from the laneway. That has been assessed by our engineers, and they're satisfied that that is appropriate, subject to conditions which were on the original approval to upgrade the lane.
Further questions? Yes.
If there was a strong residential component, as has been suggested and is wanted in this location, there would be more residential type vehicles, whereas this is actually a medical centre, a fully functioning medical centre with commercial tenancies on the ground floor. What's your opinion about the volume of traffic? We don't have a traffic engineer here, but that's actually a laneway used by the local community. It's activated by walking, dogs, and small amount of vehicles only entering to service single residential houses. I'd like to hear more about the traffic assessment and the appropriateness of medical centre vehicles using that laneway.
As you mentioned, we don't have a traffic engineer here, unfortunately, but that was assessed as part of the 4-month application. Essentially, the traffic impact has not changed since that assessment was done, and we did have traffic engineers at that point speak to the DAP. With their recommendations, they are in support of that. Yes, essentially, the traffic impact statement provided by the applicant is deemed satisfactory and to our city engineers.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions to officers? Shall we go to Fergus Bennett and over to you, Sarah?
Thank you. With regard to the 5-star neighbours rating, can the city officers basically prepare an amended condition to that effect? Because the restaurant at this location is quite valued and appreciated by the community. So, and it's probably the aspect of the redevelopment that the community does approve of. So I would have concerns if a restriction was put on the development that prevented a restaurant continuing to operate there. So basically my request is, can the city assist with an amended condition? It's in line with what the proponent has agreed to.
Sorry, just before you respond, member, are you seeking something different, language different? That the applicants provided a series of wording in their presentation. Are you asking for officers to provide something different to that? Is that the question you've got for them?
No, just basically just so that when we discuss this, there's a condition ready to be put in. At the moment, I think that's just a request by the proponent rather than an actual something that we can move as an amendment.
Thank you. Officers, could you provide a response, and can you also include in your response there is language provided by the applicant, and could you also in private response indicate whether that language is the sort of language that would be appropriate, or otherwise provide us alternatives?
The city would like to retain its 5 Green Star rating. The amendment we don't support. We'd prefer to see this development have no gas come into it.
Thank you.
So find a tenant that can cook with an electric cooktop.
Okay, thank you. So I appreciate that. So if in relation specifically to the request from the member, could you provide, so I take your point about your position on it, could you provide some language as requested by the member for an alternate wording?
So the amended condition 26 in the RAR actually says 5-star Green Star as built or equivalent alternative sustainability assessment. So that does allow for us to consider some sort of alternative. I suppose if the applicant were to provide an alternative, we would run that by a sustainability consultant to confirm that achieves that condition.
Thank you. Back to you.
Can I?
Yes, you can.
Follow up on that. Do you regard 5-star NAB as equivalent to 5-star Green Star? No. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Fergus, Bennett.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Any further questions from members? Over to Deputy Presiding Member.
Thank you, Presiding Member. So the second reason for refusal in the RAR states the application contains no mixed use and it's not compliant with the RAR codes. Is there a specific requirement under your scheme or policies for inclusion of a residential component on this site?
No, essentially.
Thank you. In second question, in relation to the awnings, page 7 of your RAR states that a legal question was raised which highlighted that the awning component of the original DA was not administered correctly. You may not be able to answer this given it was a legal issue, but if you could, are you able to expand on this, please? What was the issue?
I suppose there was a request from councillors that a legal review of the application process go through. The legal advice essentially came back explaining that the only thing that could be contended would be the awnings over the footpath because unfortunately at that time we didn't get the application form signed by the city as the landowner of the road reserve. My understanding is that there is no appetite to sign that application form as part of this application, and thereby to remove that legal question altogether, the applicant has chosen to remove the awnings.
Thank you. Just back on the...
Sorry, you're going to specifically follow up on that issue. So if at some stage you want to put the awning back in, that would be a separate application, presumably.
Yes, I mean, we'd prefer to see the awnings go back in.
Yeah, but they could do that as a separate application.
They could, yes.
As long as they're lightweight. So we're getting some that are very solid concrete cantilevered awnings in the city, which we don't support. But if they're more of a lightweight structure,
that they can do that at some stage.
Yes.
Sorry.
Just also touching on the Green Star rating. So what was the Green Star rating that was intended with the original DA?
It was intended to be a 5-star Green Star with the original DA.
How does that requirement tie into your underlying planning framework? I note there are states that your policy on sustainable design doesn't actually technically apply to this development. So where does that requirement for a 5-star rating come from?
It wasn't necessarily directly stemming from our sustainable design policy. I think it was more in response to the 10 planning principles and sustainability and to meet those requirements from a design review panel point of view.
So are you saying without a 5-star Green Star rating, they wouldn't have met those 10 principles of state planning policy 7.0?
Potentially. It's hard to say what the panel would have scored it if it was less than a 5-star, but at that time they were content with the 5-star to meet that design principle.
Thank you.
Any further questions from panel members? Thank you. If there are no further questions, we move back to the agenda. We have a recommendation at the beginning of the graph. Recommendation is for refusal. There are 4 reasons for that refusal. Is there a mover of the recommendation for refusal? It is moved. Member Rebecca Cogland. Is there a seconder? It is seconded. Member Fergus Bennett. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Thank you, presiding member. I am actually wanting to actually go back to removing to a full refusal. So I put my hand up for that because it's in the report, but the opportunity to refuse the application and go back to a full redesign can't be lost here because it's a local centre, zoned R60, and it should have that residential component. Because people want to age in place and stay in the suburb or come into the suburb. So this would be an opportunity missed. So that's my first reason. The second reason is it isn't compliant with the precinct plan, Waratah Precinct LPP 5.14, which supports the local planning framework of the City of Nedlands. And thirdly, this is still an overheight building for an R60 location. It's a large commercial medical centre, and 4, clause 67 amenity hasn't been given the necessary due regard. It is stated here that it has been, but there have been, as our Director of Planning said, a huge amount of opposition to this, and also the vehicle laneway, whilst it may meet the planning framework in that it's been given a tick that it can accommodate the commercial vehicles using the medical centre and the ground floor tenancies, it's still not appropriate because that laneway is not designed to accommodate the vehicles and the volume of vehicles in a local centre. So for those reasons, I would like to put on the table a full refusal and go back to a redesign if the seconder will accept that.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
Well, I agree that the laneway is problematic, and during the original approval of this development, I explained my opposition to the laneway's positioning. That, I mean, even for reasons of being able to find your way into this building, it would make more sense if it was on a more visible main road for both pedestrians and motorists. And by having that laneway there, there'll be people weaving through quite narrow, poorly built laneways past residential housing. Having said that, the city's own local planning policy recommends this, which is problematic, and perhaps the council needs to go back and relook at that. And I also totally agree that there is no residential element here. And this is a part of Nedlands which is predominantly single residential in all directions. And some additional apartment type residential would have benefited both people who want to remain in the area as well as people looking for something more affordable than a quarter-acre lot with a house on it. But once again, having said that, this is a Form 2 application which is seeking to basically change the layout of what's happening inside the building envelope. So in terms of refusing this, I believe that if it was refused, the initial approval would still stand. So I agree with the sentiment that there are problems with this development, but being limited by the Form 2 application and having to only concentrate on the things that have been changed within that Form 2 application, I'm not sure whether a full refusal would actually help and would probably be challenged, legally challenged. So, I mean, I support the sentiment, but I'm not sure if there's much that can be done at this stage. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments from panel members? John Syme?
Yes, look, I don't accept, I won't be voting for this particular proposal, for this particular motion. I think this is, as Councillor Bennett says, this is a Form 2 application. The changes which are in there are really relatively minor. They're the sorts of things that you'd expect in design development. They are minor changes to some of the floor levels, so it has a better presence to the street. There are some very minor changes of some of the format of the internal of the building, but they in some are very minor, and I think the RAR accepts that. And there is no change to already approved access arrangements as to do with the access up the laneway. There is no change to height. There is no change to land use and so on, and in a general sense. So for all those reasons, I foreshadow a much simpler alternate motion.
Thank you. Any other members wish to speak on this motion? Come to yourself.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I too am unable to support the recommendation for refusal of this application, and certainly not for the reasons provided in the report, which I feel are somewhat unclear and lack sound planning rationale. Reason 1 states only that the development isn't compliant with local planning policy 5.14, but the body of the RAI actually outlines that the amended proposal aligns more consistently with the newly adopted policy than it did with the policy that the original proposal was assessed under. Reason 2 is a statement which is technically inaccurate rather than a reason for refusal with any solid planning basis in my view. Reason 3 isn't, in my review, a reason for refusal. It reads as a condition which attempts to make a rather significant change to a proposal which has already been approved and should not be contemplated by a Form 2 application. Similarly, reason 4 relates to a component of the proposal which has been approved and should not be the subject of this Form 2 application. In my view, this Form 2 application does not reasonably open the door for a second opportunity to knock back or significantly alter the original proposal. It only applies to the amendments that are being proposed, which don't materially alter the external build form or the impact that the development will have on neighbours of the surroundings. Received to this Form 2 application largely apply to issues which have already been approved. In relation to concerns about the only discretionary land use being the medical centre, it's worth noting that the size and therefore any impact of this use is being reduced with this application. Although the number of parking bays is proposed to be reduced, the parking provision still aligns with both the current and proposed parking policy. And although there might be a slightly higher trip generation as a result of the increase in size of the shop land use, which is a permitted use, the technical note provided indicates the trip generation and traffic movement will still be well within the capacity of the surrounding road network. Overall, I'm of the view that the changes proposed as part of this Form 2 are minor. They align with the most current planning framework and they don't increase any negative amenity impacts, and there is really, therefore, no reasonable planning basis for refusal of this application. And I foreshadow that if the refusal motion is lost, I'll be supporting the alternative recommendation for approval. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you for your comments. I will make some comments on the proposal. On the recommendation, I do not support a refusal. I mirror a number of the comments that have already been said, and particularly in relation to this is a Form 2 application, and therefore we're considering changes from what has been previously approved. I'd also make some general comments about the consideration under LPP 5.14 and note that the scheme that I have a copy of, which is the scheme downloaded from the department's website, provides some specific detail regarding this site or a local centre site. That's contained both in clause 16 of zoning objectives and clause 32.4 of additional development requirements, none of which require, or land use provisions, none of which require as a mandatory component to the development any residential. So particularly I do not support any consideration of revisiting a proposal in its entirety. It's not the subject of a Form 2 application, and more significant, or as significantly, the provisions of the scheme that are in play at present provide for local centres to have this form of development in terms of land uses. Those are my general comments, so I won't repeat the comments that other members have said. I'm moving back to the mover for right of reply and close of debate.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Sitting here today, we shouldn't be predictable. And that's what is exactly happening. This might be an amendment, but we have an opportunity here to look at redevelopment on the site and contribute to the dwelling yield that the City of Nedlands has been asked to contribute to. And so when you have a redevelopment in a primarily residential area, in a local centre, it is an opportunity missed. And it is also an opportunity missed here today, because what's before us was subject, and I should be able to speak about it, a lengthy debate by this panel. I listened to that debate on whether this original proposal was sound. So whilst it might fit some clauses, the actual test of whether it is right for this site is not answered here today. A large commercial medical centre without a residential component is not an acceptable land use for a community that wants to age in place, does want some activity and vibrancy on the site. It's a corner site. It's got what's traditionally been a rear access laneway for single residential homes on large garden suburb blocks. The suburb was set out as a garden suburb, and that is actually what it is. We have to support redevelopment, and we are not opposed to development. What we are opposed to is inappropriate development on this site. And because it's come back as an amendment and a panel has been constituted under the DAP scheme, it's still an opportunity to say we're actually behind approving all of these designs, but the community doesn't have a voice. And clause 67 is always downplayed. The amenity component of reports is always given a few paragraphs, and then you get a submissions. You don't get the full submission, you get a table. So I'm here today to say, against the voices of opposition, that you should be thinking about the proposal here and what will happen on that site. It is an opportunity lost on a corner site with 2 street activations available to it, and using a rear laneway, like a country laneway, in a highly sought after residential area. And I also want to finish by saying that under the Monash Health Study, Nedlands was right up there as a suburb that's very healthy extremely healthy. We want to maintain that status, but we don't want a commercial medical centre that may not be doing primary health care, which is what people want to maintain that health. So, panel, just accept today that the community and the city of Nedlands doesn't want a large commercial medical centre on that site that is an overbuild and an overheight and is not appropriate. And while you're saying it could be compliant with LPP 5.14 Waratah precinct, there's parts of that where it's not compliant, and there's parts of that where we actually should be saying to ourselves, this is a local centre, and you're flipping to something that is not going to be sitting in a local community centre and not assisting the community to age in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we've had closing comments. I'm now going to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Motion is lost 3-2. Sorry, 2-3. Did you get the member vote? Thank you. We move back to members. We have an alternate provided for us in the documentation. That is an alternate for the wording in here is an alternate should be approved. It's a series of conditions. I'm going to ask members, what motion do they wish to move? And there are some comments from the applicant. Is there a mover for the, sorry, what motion are you moving?
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, is there a mover for the motion as written in the agenda for approval, which includes amendment condition 25, deletion of condition 24, and new conditions 27, 28, and 29? Is there a mover of that motion?
Happy to move for the purposes of debate, presiding member.
I was going to move something a bit different.
It's moved. Member Dale Page. Is there a seconder for this motion?
Yeah.
It is seconded. John Syme. Would the mover like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, presiding member. As mentioned in my reasoning for not supporting the refusal, I feel the changes proposed by this Form 2 application align with the planning framework and do not materially alter the build form or the impact of the development on its surrounds. I don't, however, support new conditions 27, 28 and 29 proposed as part of the council's alternate recommendation, and I'd like to move an amendment to delete these as they're a second bite of the cherry for a proposal that's already been approved.
We have amendment 1 is to delete conditions 27, 28, 29. Is there a seconder? It is seconded. John Syme. Would the mover like to speak?
It's just very briefly, I think these conditions are seeking to amend aspects of the proposal that have already been approved and are not subject of the Form 2 application before us, so I don't feel they're appropriate.
Seconder like to speak to the motion?
Yes, agreed. All of these issues were debated at length in the original Form 1 approval. They cannot be revisited in this forum.
Are there any other speakers on amendment 1? Sorry, yes, member.
Could we please have a full, in front of us, a written statement about that amendment? And could you actually say it, please, so that we know exactly what you're speaking to?
The amendment information, I'll get the member to read it. My understanding is it's contained within the beginning of the recommendation, just after the refusal. That is the current wording in there, and the amendment. Would you like to talk to the amendment?
Yes, I'm happy to reiterate the point I made. I don't support new conditions 27, 28 and 29, which are proposed as part of Council's alternate recommendation. And those conditions relate to new condition 27 requires the plans to be amended to relocate the vehicle access point. 28 requires the plans to be amended to reduce the building height, and 29 requires a traffic study to be provided to investigate traffic management measures. As mentioned, I think these amendments are seeking to amend aspects of the proposal that have already been approved They're not the subject of the Form 2 application for us, so I don't support those conditions.
Thank you for that clarification. Member, would you like to speak to it? No?
Councillor
Sorry.
Bennett, and then I'll speak.
Member Fergus Bennett, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Thank you. Just a point of clarification.
Sorry, you're not on mute at the moment, Councillor Bennett. It's at our end.
Can you hear me?
Councillor Bennett, your speaker's not working.
Testing, testing. I don't know what to do if you can't hear me.
No, we can't hear at the moment. Can we just check at our end?
It's not out.
Okay.
I'm not muted.
At the moment, Councillor Bennett, it's coming up that our end is, there's no changes at ours. It seems like you just try again now.
Hello?
No, I can't hear you. We're just double checking at our end as well.
Sounds on. Did you turn anything off?
Testing, testing, testing. Testing, testing. Shall I reconnect?
Can you speak now, Councillor Bennett?
Hello?
Sound in this room's gone.
Hello? Can you hear me? Working on my end.
Started to work just now.
Okay.
Myself, Councillor Fergus Bennett.
Okay. Thank you. Just a point of clarification. It seems like these conditions that are being amended were actually part of the what was just previously moved and refused. And aren't we now talking about the officer recommendation on page 8, which I don't think has any mention of those conditions? Just to clarify it, is that?
We're speaking to the latest version of the agenda, which includes after on page 5 and 6, it includes the refusal, and then it moves through to on page 6, electronic page 6, and it is page 1 of the RA. It refers to should the panel be of a mind to approve the application, the following resolution is recommended. That starts just below the top of page 1, RA page 1, electronic page 6. That's what we're referring to. And the conditions, the new conditions that are the subject of this amendment are on the beginning of RA page 2, electronic page 7. And they refer to page 27, 28, new condition 27, 28, 29. Those are the 3 conditions that are the subject of Amendment 1 to delete.
Okay. Sorry, I got a bit confused. It seems like there's 3 different versions, and I was looking at the one on page 8. I understand now. Thank you.
No problems. Did you wish to speak any further?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, presiding member. The conditions have been put in there because the systematic problems with the vehicle access and Waratah Avenue can cope with an access point, and the amendment to reduce the building height is because it's in R60 development and the building envelope has been pushed on that site to be a commercial medical centre with activation on the ground floor of commercial tenancies. And the traffic study should be investigated to deter vehicles coming and leaving from Robert Street. north of Phillip Road because of the fact that it's a corner block. And so therefore it's recommended that a traffic study. Time after time, we have inadequate traffic studies coming to the panel, and it's left to sort it out by the local community or the local government. And we've got a golden opportunity here to include these new conditions. So I fully support them, and I fully don't support the amendment that is before us to delete them.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on Amendment 1? If there are no speakers on Amendment 1, I move back to the mover for right of reply.
Nothing further to add. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you. We are going to the vote on Amendment 1, which is deletion of new condition 27, 28 and 29. All those in favour? Against? It is carried 3-2. Has the minute taker got the member vote? Thank you. Move back to yourself.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I would also like to move a second amendment to alter Council's proposed wording of condition 25 to delete the wording 5-star Green Star and replace it with 5-star neighbours rating.
So we are dealing with, is there a mover for a modification to condition 25? It is seconded, sorry, I beg your pardon. It is seconded, John Syme. For the members, are you clear what the amendment is? Would you like it read out again?
No, I've got it in front of me. I just wanted to emphasise it before.
Thank you. Would you like to speak for that?
Thank you. Very briefly, I think a 5-star Green Star rating would place an unnecessary and unreasonable impost on a development of this nature at this point, especially given the proposed change is not actually underpinned to a planning policy relevant to the application. It's actually my view the condition shouldn't apply for, but given it already does and is not the subject of the Form 2 application per se, I'm happy to retain but amend to 5-star neighbours rating. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the?
Very briefly, look, I appreciate the sentiment of the officers of the city to say we would need to go all electric, but we're not nowhere near that yet, particularly for commercial applications like cafes and restaurants and so on. I think gas supply there is essential. And it may be that it will be forever, and gas may be at some stage hydrogen, not LNG. I think it's quite inappropriate for us to fetter the commercial operations in this way. So I think, and the applicant has already said that they will achieve a 5-star NABERS rating, which itself is not insubstantial. So I think this is a much better approach.
Thank you. Any other speakers on Amendment 2?
Yeah, I'd like to speak against that. As the Director of Planning said, find a restaurant that can deal with electric. This is a golden opportunity with a new development to set a standard, and we're missing it, and we're giving a whole lot of reasons why, and yet the community is saying this is what we need. We need to actually reflect the current sentiment, and we need to actually do it rather than just condition it away. It's a golden opportunity missed, and it should be noted that this opportunity was not taken up.
Thank you. Any other speakers on this motion? Yes, Councillor Fergus-Bennett.
I agree with the sentiment of making all development as sustainable as possible. But I have a problem with basically the one aspect of this development, which is the local restaurant that the entire community loves, by putting a condition on this proposal that would make it more expensive and more difficult for that restaurant to operate, may actually prevent that restaurant from even continuing its operations. Member Symes made a good point that perhaps there are other forms of gas that are more sustainable that might be used in the future. I'm not, if it was converted to a completely electric restaurant, the electricity that's being generated is probably being generated by a very large proportion of coal and gas anyway. So I don't think it's appropriate to put that burden on a much loved local restaurant that the whole community wants. And in my consultation with the community, this was the restaurant is the aspect of it that they're all supportive of. So it seems unfair to really put that burden on the local business that everybody wants to keep, just to spite the rest of the development. And I don't think that's appropriate, so I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I will speak to this amendment. I'm supportive of the modification to the amendment, noting all the comments that have been provided, in particular that there is a 5-star NAICS rating on it, which will continue to apply to the site. And I take the comments that have been provided in relation to the street activation activities and the position of a local restaurant as part of the land use offerings that supports the local community element. So I think that's a very important perspective. In particular, I would agree with the comments in relation to gas supply and the impact that it might have on the land use. Those are my comments. I move back to the mover for right of reply and close of debate on amendment 2.
Nothing further to add. Thank you, presiding member.
We are going to the vote on amendment 2. All those in favour? Against? It's carried 4-1. Has the minute taken got to the vote? Would you like to continue speaking?
I have nothing further to add to discussion on the primary motion. Thank you, presiding member. I think I have made my views. Yeah.
Would the seconder like to speak on the primary vote?
Oh, I think everything's been said at this stage. Thanks.
Are there any other speakers on this motion? There are no other speakers. I move back to the mover for right of reply and close of debate on the substantive.
Nothing further to add.
We are going to the vote on the substantive inclusive of the 2 amendments. All those in favour? Against? Is carried 3-2. Thank you for that. We now move back to the agenda. We are still in part B. We have dealt with item 4. There are no item 5 applications. I would like to thank Councillor Fergus Bennett and Councillor Rebecca Coughlin from the City of Nedlands for their attendance and participation. It is 10:29 and we will be changing members. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to today's meeting. We are dealing with Part C, City of Melville. Welcome to the meeting, Councillor Matthew Woodall. Welcome, and welcome to Councillor Daniel Lim, both online for today's meeting. We have a full contingent for our panel today of 5 members. Panel members, we will move first to item 1, declaration of due consideration. I'm going to have a show of hands if you've duly considered all matters before you in relation to this item. That is unanimous for the minute taker. Members, are there any disclosures of interest? Yes, Mr. John Syme.
Yes, look, I declare an interest in this. I'm currently undertaking a land economics analysis for the City of Melville to inform their review of the Melville City Centre structure plan, the boundaries of which includes this particular site, The subject site's located within frame precinct B of the precinct area. And for that reason, I think I should recuse myself from this meeting.
Thank you. The interest has been provided by Mr. John Syme, as the interest covers the subject site. Mr. Syme will not be participating in this section of the meeting in relation to this item, and nor will he participate in any voting on this item. Are there any other member interests in relation to this matter? That is nil for the minute taker, and if you can also record that Mr. Syme is not participating. Mr. Syme, accordance says he's not participating. He has moved from the viewing area for this item, so it's clear which members are participating in today's item. I move forward to our Form 1 application at item 3, and we have one presenter, Mr. Joshua Carmody. And would you like to present to this proposal?
Good morning. I'm Josh Carmody from Planning Solutions, acting on behalf of Spinnaker Developments, and with me is Sam Clopper, the project architect, and we have on teams Brian, the traffic engineer. So I'll be presenting. They'll be available to answer any questions that might arise. I'll be speaking in support of the development and also in support of the city's recommendation for approval. So I guess I'll start by saying the city's planning staff have been very efficient in assessing and processing this application, and we're grateful for that. This development will be delivered under contract to the Department of Communities and provide 20 high amenity social housing units in a high amenity location. The conditions which the city's put forward are almost all acceptable. There's only one exception, which I'll talk about now, which is condition 12. Condition 12 would require the development to be modified so that the basement parking ramp is set back 6 metres from the lot boundary. We're proposing that it be set back 6 metres from the pedestrian footpath, so the ramp is partially on the verge, partially on within the lot boundary. This is a solution that was proposed by the project's traffic engineer, Brian here, on the grounds that the Australian standard assumes the footpath is located along the lot boundary, whereas in the case of the City of Melville, it's located along the road alignment. The intent of the standard is to ensure that the driver exiting the property can see pedestrians before the vehicle crosses a footpath. So whilst we are proposing a technical variation to the Australian standard, it doesn't compromise pedestrian safety or the considerations that the standard seeks to protect. And again, any questions about that can be directed to Brian. The city does have a concern that pedestrian activity could move closer to the property boundary, given this variation. In my view, this is a concern that can easily be addressed with a modified condition 12 that simply requires the obstruction of pedestrian movements between the entrance footpath and the driveway. And that could be achieved with landscaping or potentially bicycle racks in the verge area, given there's already bicycle racks proposed. So I've provided some suggested alternative wording in my presentation notes. I did make one error in that. I forgot to cross out the word driveway as well as ramp gradients. But the intent of those modifications is simply to prevent pedestrian movement between the footpath to the building entrance and the crossover driveway. The city's RER says that this standard should be complied with because modifying it complying with the Australian standard would not affect any other element of the proposal. Now, my understanding is that this is not the case, and we understand that if the ramp has to be moved back onto the lot boundary within the lot, it will require changes to the building structure and potentially the loss of car bays in the basements. So there are costs and implications. But to be clear, they can be managed. We can apply the condition as proposed by the city, but it's an unnecessary additional cost in our view. So as I said, Sam is also here. He can answer any questions about the design of the project.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions to the applicant? There are no questions there. I beg your pardon.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Sorry, would you like to speak, Councillor Daniel Lim?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. How many lots of car bays would that be if we were to make that amendment? Thank you.
Well, they're paired, so it's likely to be 2. I don't think it'd be more than 2. It would be effective,
Okay.
pushing it all back 2.
Thank you. Are there any other questions to the applicant? I have a question to the applicant. Could you clarify further your comments in relation to the building? My read of the material that you've provided as part of the request for this condition to be varied is that the works are essentially necessary to, one, contain cars. What implications on the structure? And I suppose where I'm leading to, and it's going to be a similar question to the officers, is it is unusual in the meetings that I've been to for permanent elements of a development to be incorporated onto the public space, such as the roadway. And the information that I've got in front of me implies that these are necessary to facilitate both the ramp but also the structure of the building. Can you clarify further the permanency of any works within the public domain? So typically they are works that are capable of being removed.
Yeah, I think that there's a discussion about the interface between a crossover and the footpath, and there was a proposal to introduce something between the footpath and the driveway. There was a series of proposals kind of tabled, one of which was simply landscaping. Another idea was removable bike racks. So they're 2 kind of ideas, but we're not using the structure as part of a retaining outside of the lot, or it's not critical to the structure of the building. The reference to structure is simply that there's a big beam which is immovable about 8 metres back from the boundary that we have to get under, and in order to get under that we need to start at the boundary, not 6 metres further into the boundary. So these structures in the front area are really like paving and bike parks.
And that immovable structure you're referring to is based on the construction design details at this stage. I'm trying to
Well, it's a 5.5 metre wide cut, and we are concurrently, which is a bit unusual, we're concurrently documenting and seeking approval. The state and the developer are keen to build these homes. That's their risk. But there is a beam that travels between the 2 walls of, I think it's 600 deep, and it's just a pinch point, and we are simultaneously trying to solve that through structure, but it would be more normal for us to be allowed to do a 1 and 8, 1 and 4, 1 and 8 on our site, rather than pushing that arrangement 6 metres back from the site to create effectively a second verge within our site.
And what do you, sorry, Jill,
just to follow up.
What do you say the impact of the loss of bays, given the site is basically where it's located opposite the shopping centre and all the other elements that are around it, or transportation, etc. What do you say is the significant impact in relation to, should that condition be retained, resident or occupant amenity? What's the impact you say?
Well, parking is always a pretty critical issue for a community. The needs of these users is not yet known. We aren't making assumptions about them not having cars or not needing cars, because that kind of presupposes the cohort. Any additional bays on site is less bays potentially outside of the site, which is typically what the community is seeking. So we see maximising bays on grade without digging at the back is kind of a good outcome for servicing the building and also not adding any load to local streets. So reducing that number potentially could increase or reduce the amount of bays we have on site.
Thank you.
Sorry, if I could just add to that. We've outlined in the report, and this is accepted, the Department of Communities obviously allocates residents based on their parking needs. So they have the capacity to manage the building to whatever parking is provided. but is obviously better to provide the amount that we've currently got. Gives them greater flexibility.
And the building, the parking would be one thing, but the building, in order to make social housing work, you have to make it really, really simple and make it, and that includes not over complicating the interface with the ground and where we cut into the site. I'm concerned about what that would mean in terms of creating complex geometries and beams in order to solve a perceived issue which we think is manageable through other means.
Thank you.
And it's really just to simplify for my own clarity. The component of this that sits outside of your property boundary,
Yep.
We're not talking about any structure other than a crossover.
It's just a
Are we?
crossover.
Are you simply the gradient of that interface that we're talking about? Is that right?
There's also a conversation about what happens with inside, is that right?
So, yeah, we're just talking about the slope of the driveway.
Yeah.
That's it. So, yeah, any reference to anything else, landscaping of the verge is obviously acceptable. We've also suggested bike racks because that's also acceptable to the city, but ultimately that decision can be made later by them.
Thank you. Any other questions at this juncture? If there are no other questions from members, thank you very much for your presentation. We will now, officers, officers online?
Yes, Chair.
And officers, could you advise, is it just yourself?
It's myself and Troy Capalucci online here, and our traffic engineer should also be online, Kamal Khalil. But yeah, he should be online, but he's at home unwell.
Not a problem. Thank you. Officers, I can't see you at the moment. If you could turn on your, great, thank you. Officers,
hey, sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm handing over to yourselves. Do you have any comments you wish to make? And in particular, if you'd make any comments in relation to the applicant's comments in condition 12.
Yeah, of course. To begin, generally speaking, the application was found to be broadly acceptable, and where it wasn't seen acceptable, those matters have been addressed through conditions of development approval. In terms of the questions raised about condition 12, those are probably best responded to by Kamal. But I would also note that potentially if we do go down the road of modifying conditions in relation to this, that condition 11 may also require modification in the event that the panel chooses to modify those conditions, because that also does relate to driveway gradients and amended plans. But yeah, generally speaking, the application was found to be satisfactory as per the RAR, and I'm happy for Kamal to provide some commentary on the changes to the conditions on driveway gradients.
Thank you. Kamal, you are on, I can't see you at the moment. If you'd like to make some comments.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I just tried to make a point here. Sorry, I'm a bit, my nose is blocked, so a bit of cold. It should be noted that the requirement stated by the Australian standard is a minimum requirement. Those requirements could be increased. Always the 1 in 20 gradient requirement for the first 6 meters into the car park should always be the default design position. You cannot just simply dismiss those requirements because of just trying to reduce the cost of the building. It's part of that building. Compromising those requirements basically would endanger the safety of pedestrians. There is no any assumption on the standard that states that this requirement is required. The first 6 meters should be required if the footpath is adjacent to the building, and might not be required if the footpath is away from the building. There is no such a statement on the standard. The standards make it clear. In other positions, it makes some adjustment in terms of reducing or increasing the required gradient in the case where the grade is downgrade from the car park into the road by reducing to 1 in 8 instead of 1 in 20, but never eliminates the need for the first 6 meters to be within the property, inside the property 1 in 20. Eliminating those requirements is going to endanger pedestrians and compromise the safety of pedestrians. As always, it's possible people could move around the verge area. The personnel, maintenance people, mail delivery personnel could move down to the verge. So those would be endangered because the vehicles exiting from the car park will not have appropriate sight line to see any pedestrian within that area. Proposing a temporary measure is not going to resolve the issue. This could be removed at any time.
Okay.
I would like to point out as well one thing here. Almondbury Road is increasing in terms of residential density, is increasing Almondbury Road because of those development. We got a proposed Westfield Carousel, Westfield Progun is proposed for development. If the encroachment of the driveway into the verge will basically deny the city future upgrade to link the Risley Activity Center within the Burgoon Center via Lincoln's Road. Lincoln's Road is next road that has been, the footpath has been widened to 4 meters. The whole purpose is to link to the activity center in Risley Street. So introducing a gradient into the footpath or encroaching into the footpath will deny the city any future development of the footpath in that area. So there is highly likely that the footpath in the future will be upgraded. So with the gradient encroaching into the footpath, that opportunity will not be possible. So for this reason, I don't think we should be compromising into on the safety or accept any sort of or dismiss the requirement by the standard. So that's basically, as I said initially, that's a minimum requirement by the standard. It should not be dismissed.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question.
Thank you for that explanation. So is it legally and technically possible to vary an Australian standard?
Variable, yes, reasonable. Is the strong reason for it. Here, we don't see any reason from the applicant why they didn't try to meet the standard. The issue here is simply because it's going to increase a little bit of cost or lose a little to base. I don't think that's a strong reason.
That's okay. You've answered my question. Thank you very much. One other thing, just in picking up on your point about future upgrades of the footpath and complexity that might generate if the grade is different. Is it not possible for the city to come to some agreement with the landowner about the potential future upgrades and their ability to upgrade the footpath, even if the grade is different? Is an agreement even needed? I mean, it's a footpath on public land. You're able to upgrade it if it's on public land. What would be the implications? Why wouldn't you be able to upgrade that footpath?
We won't be able to upgrade the footpath because there is no proper sight line. That requirement, the 1 in 20 gradient for the first 6 meters, is to provide a good vision for traffic exiting from the car park. So they can see.
I got that bit. Sorry to chip in. You've explained that well. Yeah. What you did raise at the latter part of your answer was another complication is that you might need to upgrade the footpath in future. But surely a different gradient to this driveway essentially should not impede your ability to upgrade the footpath, should it?
The upgrading of footpath could be closer to the building. One of the possibility, not necessarily would be where it is now. So any modifications of footpaths will be restricted. It should be to where it is. So there won't be any widening of the footpaths to get it closer to the building. That's what I meant by restriction. Yeah.
Are there any further questions from panel members to officers?
I have.
Yes, over to yourself.
I have a few questions if you don't mind. So condition 20 refers to the landscape screening, and it states that if the screening doesn't meet an adequate level of privacy, then other screening needs to be installed. How would you define an adequate level of privacy, and who will decide whether it's been achieved or not?
That would be to the city's satisfaction. Generally speaking, we would be looking for direct overlooking towards a neighbouring property, something in the order of 75% obscure. But unfortunately, screening is not specifically defined in Volume 2 of the Residential Design Code, so we didn't have a specific definition to lean on. And then at that higher level, more directed towards roofs, generally speaking.
Okay, and is that something that's generally understood? I'm just mindful if it comes to clearing this condition and there's ever a conflict between, let's say, for instance, you say, I don't feel that there's adequate screening, and the owner and the designer says, well, we think there is. I know it's to your satisfaction, but how will you measure that? Will you measure it on the basis of those requirements you've just given?
Most likely, yes, that would be. So it may be beneficial to add an advice note stating something along those lines. I know that those are sort of general statements and sort of difficult to put in a condition, especially without a definition in Volume 2 to lean on. However, for greater clarity in the clearance of that condition, I think it would be beneficial to add a potential advice note noting those matters.
Okay. Could I ask one of you to start casting your mind to some?
Of course.
For that. Condition 26 requires written confirmation from the landowner that all recommendations in the acoustic report have been incorporated into the building design. Does this go far enough, or do you think you would need certification from a consultant that the recommendations have been implemented and are functioning adequately to keep noise within required levels? Are you comfortable that written confirmation from the landowner will be enough for you to clear that condition?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So you've got an advice note 3 which relates to tree protection zones, and I'm curious as to why you haven't included that as a condition instead. Are you comfortable an advice note has enough teeth for you to manage this issue the way that you want to?
Yes, mostly because those matters are handled, well, they're off-site, basically any verge trees, and it's been found difficult for us to enforce those conditions through the planning process. As such, it would be handled separately, and in this case, there are only verge trees on neighbouring properties, on the verges of neighbouring properties. As such, it's more for completeness than anything else.
Okay. Thank you for that. Last thing from me, advice note 6 largely duplicates advice note 4. Would you be happy for us to delete one of them, and which one?
Preferably advice note. Okay, that's been added through the drafting process, I think. Advice note 6, as it's the last one, is fine to be deleted.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any further questions from panel members? If there are no further questions, we move back to the agenda. There is a recommendation at the beginning of the agenda. The recommendation is for approval. Is there a mover of the recommendation? Just on your, sorry, officers, you're on silence, yep, great. We're now going to call for a mover of the recommendation as written. Is there a mover of this recommendation?
Purposes of debate.
It is moved, Dale Page. Is there a seconder for this proposal? I will second it for this discussion. over to yourself.
Thank you, presiding member. Happy to support the recommendation for approval. I would, however, like to move a couple of minor amendments. Amendment 1 is to add an advice note that relates to condition 20. And I think the officers are wordsmithing the wording at the moment, but it will have the effect of clarifying what the applicant can expect would be a suitable level of privacy that is achieved by the landscape screen. I just don't, I'll talk further on that when I have a second.
I'm happy to second it, but I'd like to hear the language. Have the officers got the wording of this advice note available or suggested wording?
Just working on that now, apologies. Something along the lines of, in regard to condition 20, the landscape screening shall achieve a minimum obscurity of 75% on levels 2 and 3, I would say, of the development, like the ground floor 2 and just thinking out loud, on the top floor it may be difficult to achieve, and any overlooking down would be appropriately mitigated. So on levels the ground floor and level and the first upper floor, so ground floor and level 1, shall achieve 75% obscure to the satisfaction of the City of Melville.
So just before we move on, I'll just make a note. I've just made a note of what you've read out. And just for the members, I have got, in relation to condition 20, the landscape screening shall achieve a minimum of 75% obscurity, shall achieve a 75% obscure on levels on ground floor and level 1 to the satisfaction of the City of Melville. Are you comfortable that covers? You're saying you've got better language.
No, I'm comfortable given it's an advice note.
Did the minute taker get the language? Great. To the members, did all the members hear, and are they comfortable what we're dealing with in Amendment 1? Thank you. And yourself.
Yeah, thank you, presiding member. I think in reading that condition, I just had a little bit of a concern that if it got to clearing the condition, there might be some contention about what is adequate screening or not. So just sought some guidance, and it's really for the benefit of the applicant so they understand what they need to achieve. I wouldn't be comfortable if that formed part of the condition, but given it's an advice note, it just provides a little bit of guidance as to where the officers would be thinking when they seek to clear that condition in future.
Thank you. As the seconder, I'm comfortable with both the advice note, the status of it being an advice note, and the commentary in the rationale for supporting it. Is there any other speakers on Amendment 1? There are no other speakers on Amendment 1. Do you want to write?
Nothing further, thank you.
We'll be going to the vote. All those in favour? Is carried unanimously. For the minute taker, over to yourself.
Thank you, and just a very minor amendment, presiding member, delete advice note 6. It largely duplicates advice note 4.
Is there a seconder for this amendment 2? It is seconded. Matthew Woodall. The mover like to speak to it.
Nothing further, thank you. I think it speaks for itself.
Would the seconder like to speak to this amendment?
No, presiding member.
Are there any other speakers on Amendment 2? If not, would you like a right of reply? We are going to the vote to delete this advice note. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Would you like to continue speaking?
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to support the recommendation for approval. Much needed accommodation in the right place within a hub of public transport services and amenities. I think the RA contains a very thorough assessment of the proposal against the codes and the structure plan that applies to the site, and this assessment shows that the proposal satisfies the relevant requirements of the planning framework so as to be compatible with both the current and future context of the site. The RA shows how the proposal meets the requirements of SPP 7.0, and it's pleasing to see the applicant made amendments to the proposal in response to the issues raised by the design review panel, to the extent that it's now supported by the chair. There is discretion being sought for the number of visitor bays on site, and I'm satisfied that under the circumstances, a parking management plan will provide the flexibility required to manage the balance of resident and visitor bays on site to respond to the needs of residents at any point in time. While I'm talking about that, I'm also comfortable that if a redesign needs to occur to accommodate condition 12, which I'm not comfortable to move to amend or delete at this stage for the reasons the city's traffic engineers have given, I'm still comfortable that there'll be enough flexibility and parking on site to cater for the development, especially given the context of the development. I know there were some objections raised to the proposal, but I'm comfortable that these have all been well addressed in the RA and via conditions of approval where appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't repeat all of the things you have indicated. I am supportive of the proposal as provided. I am not seeking to move any other amendments to it. I'm satisfied the proposal meets the planning framework and it's appropriate in its locational context. And I'm comfortable at this juncture to leave condition 12, given the commentary around the strategic intent of the area and the development of the adjoining substantial commercial use. Overall, I think the development is a good development and it's excellent to see intensification of land uses in this location, given its proximity to both public transport and commercial and other activities. Overall, I'm supportive of this proposal. Are there any other members that wish to speak to the item? Member Matthew Woodall.
Thank you, presiding member. I wish to speak against. There are two main issues I want to highlight. The first is around some of the deviations from the structure plan and the framework. This development, as has been noted, doesn't meet the parking requirements and has an insufficient number of bays. There are already parking issues around that area with the shopping centre and various other uses on nearby properties with inadequate parking, and I think the lack of visitor bays and the shortfall is likely to further exacerbate that issue. I also note that no communal open space has been provided as required, and I believe there's a reference to other available public open space in the area around the city civic centre and Wireless Hill, but I don't think that should negate the need to provide some communal public open space on site, which I think is an important part of a development, particularly where it's going to be this sort of more intense social housing type development. And the other point was just around the dwelling types. It's predominantly single apartments, single bedroom apartments, which I don't think is the intent of the structure plan for each development to provide a mix of different dwelling types, so single bedroom and multi-bedroom apartments. This really is sort of out of kilter, I think, with what's intended for the area, which is a mix of dwellings. And I understand it's because it's social housing and that's the intention, but nevertheless, I think it is too significant a deviation from the structure plan. And the second point I wanted to touch on was just the design. I appreciate that the design review panel did request some changes that were made, but nevertheless, I think looking at the rendering of this that's been provided and the scale of it, this is quite a large bulk of building. It's very brick heavy, And I think I don't think it's a particularly attractive building to have in the area, and I'm concerned that it will become an eyesore in the future, given the style. In addition, if you look at the side profiles of the buildings, there's a huge use of brick and very small windows and openings. I just don't think that's the type of development that we're seeking to have in the city of Melville, particularly in this central civic centre or city centre area. I think we can do better, and we can strive to have higher quality developments in this area. And overall, based on the design and some of the deviations from the structure plan, I feel that this site is probably not appropriate for this type of development that's proposed. There's already issues with the driveway and the gradients, and that having an impact on the design. There's clearly not enough space to provide communal open space. And in addition, there's basically only single bedroom dwellings provided. And so overall, I don't think this is an appropriate development for this site, and therefore I'm against the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Yes, over to yourself, Councillor Daniel Lim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I echo the same points as Councillor Woodall. So I'm not opposed to development, especially when an application like this provides clear social benefits to provide community housing to people who needs it. But I feel that, in my opinion, it's taking away amenities in order to do that from the surrounding areas without providing any visible benefit that I can see to the local residents surrounding it. And I feel that there's a lot of, just from the conversation I hear from the other presenters, it feels that there's a lot of ambitious or idealistic assumptions being made about the users needing cars, and it seems to be gambling on local residents in order to achieve its goals. Plus, at the moment, the city of Melville is also going through its local planning scheme 6, and you can sort of hear the community consultation on the R100 zoning, and this is the sort of development that the community is rightly against. So so really this development is situated between Bougain West and Bougain East, and there's a total of 800 petition signatures right now against specifically against the R100, and I feel that the traffic impact is real. The on-street parking is going to be an issue, and I feel that the response to these issues have not really been realistic. And there's currently a living example, Infinity 8 Apartments, where it already showcases illegal parking overspills on the verges of Almondbury, and taking away footpaths. And I've checked that in spatial. It is clear that there is a lot of illegal parking happening at Almondbury, and also on the verges of at the front of the Infinity 8 Apartments. So I do think that this development is trying to do too much and is taking amenities as a result of that. So only providing 17 parking bays for 22 dwellings, and the parking bays are also at the smaller side. So it's smaller than even the smallest lot in Westfield Bougain. And I've tried parking on those lots before. It's incredibly challenging. So to have a lot smaller, it's just not a great situation to be putting the people who are living there, and also you're limiting, you're sort of setting a precedence that this can happen for any future development as well. I just feel that it is like what Councillor Woodall said, it needs to be a mixed use. So currently, I feel that there is blocks and blocks of apartments lining up. So we have Infinity 8, 2 blocks to the west, and then opposite side there's going to be 19 Almonbury, very good place. So with 57 dwellings. Yeah, I just feel that it's not the right place for it. Like this development should be more spaced out away from where it currently is. And yeah, as you can see, it's just trying to achieve too much. It's sort of non-compliant with condition 12 for the RAM just to gain 2 bays. To me, it's just the balance is off with this development. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I move back to the mover for right of reply and close of debate.
I have nothing further to add.
There is no further comments to be had. We are going to the vote. All those in favour? Against? For the minute taker, it is carried. As the presiding member, I have used my casting vote as the votes were tied, and therefore it is carried using casting vote. We move back to the agenda. There are no Section 31 SAT reconsiderations. We move to Part D and we reintroduce Mr. John Syme back into the meeting at 11:13. There are the SAT applications listed here. I have no comments on them, and accordingly I close the meeting at 11:14 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.